Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipson. Today's guest is Michael Payne, the father of Olympic branding. Michael has been at the forefront of the sports marketing industry for over 30 years, having led the global marketing efforts for the Olympic movement for more than 2 decades. He served as the IOC's first ever marketing and broadcast rights director, and he has also acted as special advisor to Formula One's former chairman and CEO, Bernie Ecclestone. Today, he runs his own global strategy advisory group, Payne Sports Media Strategies, serving a diverse group of clients and boards. Michael has recently gotten back from the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games, which is his 20th Olympic Games. Get ready to learn how the Olympics almost bankrupted, why the Olympics in Tokyo did not have spectators, although other sporting events in Tokyo had, why ambush marketing is not so common as it says in the media, and much more. Michael Payne, welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
My pleasure to join you today.
You recently came back from the Tokyo Olympics. So first of all, how was that?
Well, they were different Olympic Games. I think it would be wrong to try and hype the Games. I think it was a miracle that the Games took place. It was a miracle that the IOC succeeded in bringing 205 countries to Japan in the middle of a pandemic. But the sport was great, and what took place on the field of play was truly impressive, particularly coming out of the pandemic when you think all the athletes had a very challenging previous 18 months. And the whole experience and atmosphere within the athletes was great. And that played out on television in some countries to a spectacular Olympic Games. But equally, being there on the ground, it was a different atmosphere, having no spectators in the stadium, having the government deciding to take down all of the Olympic flags and banners throughout the city because they didn't want to create a party mood in the pandemic. But it was strange when you arrived in Tokyo and you sort of turned on the television set in your hotel room, all the local events, the baseball events, the sumo wrestling events, they all had spectators.
Yeah.
And yet the Olympics wasn't allowed to have spectators. And the more you tried to look into this, you tried to understand it, the more it became increasingly clear that some strange political game was being played between the governor and the prime minister in the lead up to the general election. And the Olympics was caught in the middle, in the crossfire of that. And I think that's a great shame, because the biggest losers of all were the Japanese people. This was their games and they couldn't attend. And yes, the polls in the lead up to the games were negative. The Japanese people were questioning whether the games should go ahead. There was a lot of frustration saying, well, how can the Olympics go ahead if we're all being locked up? But I think a lot of that was frustration with the government over a very slow vaccine rollout process, a very poor communications. And it was interesting. The moment the Japanese started winning gold medals, there was suddenly tremendous support. And the Japanese people thinking, well, this actually was great. The bubble that we all lived in Tokyo, ensured that the games didn't become a super spreader event. And once everybody realized that, got on with great sport. And depending on which country you were in, you saw a truly spectacular Olympic Games. But you can't ignore the fact that the mood and the atmosphere on the ground was unusual, to say the least.
Of course, and the Tokyo Olympics is the first ever postponed Olympics and also with the no spectators. So you have attended 20 Olympic Games, which is amazing in itself. So how do you compare these Olympics to the previous ones?
Well, it's 20 with winter, I should add. It was unique. I mean, to stage the Olympic Games in the middle of a global pandemic was unprecedented. I think I'm not sure everybody appreciated the incredible complexity of what it meant to postpone the Games. The operational logistics for the Tokyo Organizing Committee, for the IOC, it was a massive task with no pre-experience. So as I said at the beginning, it was a miracle the Games took place. But I think it would be wrong to start trying to compare one Games to the next. These were very special circumstances. For the athletes, yes, they were disappointed not to be performing in front of crowds, but they were also very, very relieved that the Olympics were taking place because they were scared that they would be cancelled. And that then would be their one, for 60 or 70% of all the Olympic athletes, they only have one shot at the Games. So, a whole generation would have lost their Olympic opportunity. And that was one of the reasons why President Bach and the IOC really drove forward to leave no stone unturned as to whether it would be possible to stage the Games, because the alternative of cancellation was really, something that you wanted at all costs to try and avoid.
I'm sure that there is also an economic aspect with the sponsorship and so on. And when you were working for IOC, you were working with the sponsorship and you were also the founder of the TOP program. So can you tell us a little bit about your role at IOC and when you worked there?
Yeah, well, maybe just to clarify the first remark you made about the financial consequences of the staging of the Games in a pandemic. And there has been a tremendous amount of misreporting in the media here, saying the only reason the IOC wanted the Games to go ahead was to protect their revenue base. Nothing could be further from the truth, because the facts are, one, as it relates to the television revenue, it was all insured. If the Games didn't happen, the IOC would have been paid by the insurance companies. Two, the sponsorship was all paid and there was no provision for any rebate. Three, the ticketing revenue, yes, that all has to be refunded, but the IOC only that's an organizing committee issue. It's not an IOC issue. So to say that the reason the Games went ahead and the media is saying it's because the IOC wanted the money, is just plain wrong. It made no difference. Arguably, the IOC probably would have saved a lot of money if the Games hadn't gone ahead, because they had to invest tremendously in the postponement. So I think it's important for people to have a proper understanding of where that played out. Back to my time at the IOC as the marketing director, I oversaw all business and commercial aspects for the Olympics, from the creation of the broadcast strategy, through to the creation of the TOP program, through to the oversight of the local programs of each organizing committee, and the whole relationship between the IOC and the host country in terms of the business structure. And it was a tremendous journey, very privileged to not only be working at the IOC, but to be there at the beginning, because you go back to the early 80s when I started, the Games, the IOC was effectively bankrupt. Nobody wanted to stage the Olympic Games. If you did stage them, there was risk of being caught up in the Cold War boycotts. There was no independent funding, and most people, were writing the obituary of the Olympics, saying, well, they've served the 20th century well, but they've become too big, too political. And it's a far cry 40 years on when you see the games today, and the IOC has most of its broadcast agreements and sponsorship agreements through to 2028 or even to 2032. And I've continued, since leaving the IOC to advise, broker, and develop many of those partnerships and agreements.
I see. So were you working now when you were in Tokyo on a consultant basis?
Nobody was there on holiday.
No.
You were only going if you had a strategic role. And the Alibaba partnership, I conceived with my Chinese partners, the agency Shanghai, the Coca-Cola menu renewal, the broadcasters from Australia, from Brazil. So I still had a broad portfolio of responsibilities in terms of it strategically advising some of these key partners.
There are some people that say that the Olympics shouldn't have happened. A New York Times article that stated that the world has had enough of Olympics. The Olympics has been so resilient over the years. So why do you think that although there are these pullbacks from the naysayers, that the Olympics keep on going and they seem to get stronger?
You're absolutely right. In the lead up to every Olympic Games, there is an increasing amount of noise, some of it fueled by the nature of social media that gives activists the oxygen to have their voice heard. And it's very easy. You come up and say, no, the Olympics must stand up for this. If it doesn't stand up for environment or whatever, it should be boycotted or whatever. And because it's the Olympics, it immediately gets great media exposure and oxygen. If it was some other event, some other company, it would never have that level of exposure. And I recently published a book before the opening of the Tokyo Games, which was a big coffee table book, the sort of unauthorized and unofficial history of the Olympics, told through 400 of the world's greatest cartoonists. And it's 1,200 cartoons and my inside stories about everything that's happened over the last 100 years. And there are probably many takeaways, but perhaps one of the most important takeaways is the resilience of the Olympic Games, the Olympic movement, that it's dealt with boycotts and scandals and funding, doping, everything. And we're reminded of all these problems and everything that's wrong with the games in the lead up to the games. And then you read all the editorials following the games, and they're nearly all universal in saying it's wonderful that the games are still there. It's wonderful they can bring humanity together. The human stories that you see with every Olympic Games is what makes it so special. That's why they must be protected. There is a tremendous amount of misinformation about the funding of the games, about the politics tied to the games, the fact that the Olympics is designed or supposed to solve all of the world's problems, when all of the politicians, all of the business leaders have all failed. But no, the Olympics, it must be their responsibility to solve it. So, it's not for the faint-hearted in terms of leading the Olympic movement. And when you see, articles or, like the New York Times piece, but trust me, for every negative article, there's more than a dozen positive ones. And I think, historians and commentators really need to look at the full big picture.
Of course. And I feel like on social media, you are very active in defending the games.
I do. I do defend what they stand for. They are not perfect, and no international organization responsible for bringing 200 countries together succeeds over 125 years and not have issues. And the IOC certainly still has its issues. But the fundamental of what it stands for should be protected and defended. And if I feel that people are misrepresenting or don't have the information or are being very selective with their facts. Sure, I will call them short. The media today is often, how can I best put this, doesn't always do their research sufficiently to have a informed and balanced opinion. And, as a result, they come up with comments or headlines that are either just wrong or completely out of context. And I've been fairly sought after with the media for at least being able to try and put things in perspective, to try and put things, the commentary as to how this works together, and also to point out, where there are problems, where there are mistakes. But I think if you go back now and look at the Tokyo Games, very, very few people say that the IOC was wrong to drive ahead. The Japanese polling straight after the games across all media was between 60 and 70% saying it was the right decision to stage the games. A lot of the media was saying, the Japanese people were against. Before the games, they were uncertain. But now, they've happened, and at least acknowledge what all the polls said. But you have activists parading under often the academic world, implying that they are experts in the Olympics when they've never been to an Olympic Games, that they've never tried to understand the issues at hand. And I'm not in any way opposed to open, informed, engaged debate, and people can have different views, different opinions, but at least try and do it from an informed position.
Of course. I think that's the problem with clickbait nowadays, that you get the revenue from the amount of clicks. So if you have a catchy headline, that pays the bills. This episode is sponsored by Insport Education, the online business school for sport. They offer a range of different courses, for example, Foundations of Sport Business, Private Equity in Sport, and much, much more. As a listener to this podcast, you get 10% off all of their courses using the code SportsManagementPodcast10. Click the link in the description below and sign up today. You mentioned that the Japanese people switched from being uncertain on the negative side to being more on the positive side afterwards. And you said before also that the TV ratings went up when they were winning more medals. So do you think that the sporting performance were the most important factor for Japanese people to turn, or the event itself?
No, I think every nation wants to see their athletes bringing home the gold.
Yeah.
And it creates a tremendous sense of pride, a tremendous sense of confidence. And, the Japanese TV audience and ratings were the highest in 20 years.
Yeah.
Because the Japanese team was so successful. Guess what? Australia had some of the highest ratings they've ever seen because the Australian team was very successful. Britain, the BBC, it was a great broadcast and presentation. Spain, not as good. Guess what? The Spanish team wasn't so successful. So there is a definite direct link, and it's the same in every sport. I mean, you take the other sport I've been very closely involved with in Formula One. The TV and the audience is directly tied to the success or nationality of a given driver.
Yeah, that is interesting. If we focus a little bit on a marketing perspective, since that's what you spent most of your time within the IOC, something that occurs on every Olympic Games is ambush marketing, that companies not officially sponsoring the event tries to grab a piece of the pie, so to speak. So how is the IOC working to work against this and protect their sponsors and their partners?
There's probably far more noise about ambush marketing than actual real examples or case studies in the Olympics. The reason in the Olympics there's actually so little ambush marketing is because the IOC has worked very hard to build a fortress around the rights package by consolidating all of the rights. So as a top sponsor, you're the sponsor of the IOC, of the games, and of every single Olympic team. That's not true in the World Cup. In the World Cup, you can be the sponsor of the World Cup and then have different sponsors being sponsors of the team or individual athletes, and you have a far more competitive situation. I would say it's one of the legacies that I was maybe most proud about at the IOC was building an overall integrated strategy to, first of all, try and prevent there being any loopholes for ambush marketing to come in. And that went right down to when a city is bidding for the games 8 years before they're selected, taking total control over all outdoor advertising in the city, all outdoor advertising at the airport. So you have a complete integrated plan, which I don't think any other sports event in the world comes close to pulling together. So we work very hard on the legal structures, on integrating it, making sure that tickets couldn't be sold and used as promotions or premiums. If by chance somebody did create an ambush marketing activity, we were not shy at being very public at explaining to the public that they were being deceived. That we would stage press conferences with athletes cutting up American Express cards and other incidents where the PR teams at these big companies basically said, you really don't want to take the Olympics on because they are ruthless at how they will respond and often won't waste time for the lawyers to react. I was far more effective at going straight for the public relations. And it was interesting to see how quickly the CEO would plead for peace and immediately cut down the campaign.
That is interesting. This is a non-Olympic thing, but just from your marketing expertise, what was your opinion on Ronaldo's Coca-Cola incident at the World Cup?
It's a good example of how, the world is becoming ever more complicated, that, athletes are voicing their opinion. But I think, at the end of the day, Ronaldo also should, nobody's asking him to drink Coca-Cola, but Coca-Cola is paying his wages.
Yeah.
They may not be sponsoring that team, but they're sponsoring the tournament, and the team is getting prize money from the tournament, and the prize money is being shared with the players. So I think, there needs to be a recognition that the vast bulk of the sports world is funded through private sponsorship or broadcast rights. Governments are not necessarily lining up with increasing levels of support. So you've got to find a balance there. That being said, in the growing awareness of multiple social issues, in the case of Coca-Cola, over the last decade, they have dramatically expanded their beverage portfolio into waters and juices and health drinks, because they're the first to admit that it's not healthy to drink lots and lots and lots of Coca-Cola all day long. There's no harm in having a refreshing Coke, when it's hot or at the end of the day or whatever. But I think with any product, when it's taken to excess, there is an issue. And the sponsors, if they're aligning themselves with a healthy movement that's based on health and wellness and everything, they also must be sensitive to how they are communicating. And Coke has become very sensitive, and it's also part of their communication is the celebration. I think one of the reasons why in the end the IOC and McDonald's parted company a couple of years ago, it wasn't McDonald's walking from the IOC in the way it was represented in the media. They might as well have been pushed and shoved because they didn't understand or accept how some of the marketing had to evolve, and they became an impossible partner to manage. Years ago, we had one top sponsor, Mars, the confectionery group, who did some brilliant marketing and did some terrible marketing. And they became impossible to manage. And they turned around and said, well, you don't understand marketing. And we said, well, maybe you're right. We don't understand marketing, but we want to protect the values we stand for the Olympics. So guess what? Here's your contract. And we tore it up and refused to renew. I said, no, but we want to continue because the Olympics are in America next. I said, we thought you said you didn't understand marketing, or we didn't understand marketing. We're not interested in continuing a partnership with you, Mars. Goodbye.
Yeah, that's an interesting insight. You have written also at least 2 books, Olympic Turnaround and Tune In. So can you tell us shortly about these ones and where the listeners can buy it?
The Olympic Turnaround was written when I left the IOC, and it's more of a business sort of book. It details the story of how we turned the IOC around from bankruptcy to billion-dollar brand, and the whole journey of creating the top program, creating the TV strategy, creating the branding. And that book has been very successful. I think has been translated into more than 15 languages around the world, and is still available on Amazon as Olympic Turnaround. The new book, Tune In, it's a very large book. It's a 5-kilo coffee table book.
Oh, wow.
But has a tremendous amount of stories that have never been told. It's to give you a laugh. The skill and brilliance of the cartoonists, these are all cartoons that have already been published, and I work to clear the rights, is incredible how they can take very complicated, difficult messages and convey them simply, often with no words in the cartoon. And this book is only available online. It's for charity, and it's simply olympiccartoon.com.
Okay.
And you've got quite a comprehensive website that will give you all a flavor of what's in the book, and the stories, which range from how was the Queen persuaded to jump out of the helicopter at the London Olympic Games and keep it secret, through to the doping scandals of Sochi, the contradictions of the doping strategies in America. Anybody studying the business of sport, I think, would find both of those books a very valuable reference.
I'm sure they will. Is there something that I haven't asked you that you feel is important to mention?
We could probably keep talking for hours. There is so much to talk about on the industry, and it's a very fast-moving industry that is at the forefront of innovation, of technology, and something that everybody's very passionate about. Whether it's your local sports club in the town, through to your athletic hero at school, through to the mega events. And I think sport will only become ever more important as one of the few platforms that will unite a society, and then an environment where everything is becoming ever more diversive. It's important. And I think it's the way that people care for their teams, care for their events, and to sort of celebrate with family, friends. I think, we are living in an incredibly exciting age for the industry, but an age where everything is changing very fast, and important for the leaders in the sports field to make sure they are not asleep at the wheel.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. And that's why we love it as well, that it's ever changing. The last question that I ask everyone is, if you could choose the next guest on this podcast, who would you recommend that I should talk to?
To choose the next guest? Well, I think maybe I would actually nominate David Hill. David Hill is the TV producer, former head of Fox Network Sports, who's probably done more to revolutionize the broadcast presentation of sport and understanding what it is that makes sport special. So I think finding one or two people who, like me, have done a journey over 30 or 40 years, you get some priceless insights. You've obviously got the big sports leaders, but they're somewhat constrained with the political messages that they have to stick to. Whereas if you find people like David Hill, it can be very colorful and entertaining.
That sounds great. I will keep that in mind, David Hill. Michael Payne, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Sports Management Podcast.
Marcus, thank you very much. And I hope all your listeners enjoy listening. And if they want to find out more, track down the books. And good luck with everybody on their continued career in the industry.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @sportmpodcast.